Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
I'm Lola Blanc.
And I'm Megan Elizabeth.
And we're the hosts of Trust Me, the podcast about cults, extreme belief, and the abuse of power.
Now on Podcast 1.
We're real-life cult survivors.
And we're here to tell you anyone can join a cult.
If you've ever dived headfirst into a new self-help program,
or believed wholeheartedly in a spiritual practice,
or even just trusted someone with your life,
guess what? You're just as susceptible as everyone else.
No one is safe, especially not Megan.
I'm the most susceptible.
We want to debunk the myth that people who join cults are uneducated or naive or broken, because anyone can be manipulated by a narcissist or feel good in a new group they've joined.
And we should know we both have been.
Join us every week as we explore the world of extreme belief,
talk to survivors and experts,
and share our own experiences with cults and the abuse of power.
Don't be fooled. You might be next.
Get new episodes of Trust Me every Wednesday on Podcast 1, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Guys, is your New Year's resolution to lose 30, 50, 100 pounds or more? If so, I've got the ultimate motivation to help you accomplish your goal. Money. That's right. HealthyWage lets you bet on your weight loss and pays up to $10,000. There is nothing more motivating than real cash prizes. Tessa won over $5,000 for losing 87 pounds. Christian won over $2,400 for losing 60 pounds. You can use the free prize calculator to find your prize. It's super fun. The bigger your goal, the bigger your prize.
You can customize your challenge to go at your pace from 6 months to 18 months, lose weight safely and effectively, and you're guaranteed real cash prizes when you hit your goal. And you can build your own challenge or a workplace team wellness challenge. It's been featured on Good Morning America and The Today Show. HealthyWage has paid out over $50 million with lots of winners every day. Cash in on your weight loss today through our special link, and you will have an extra $40 added to your prize. Visit healthywage.com/prosecute and start winning for losing. Again, visit healthywage.com/prosecute for the extra $40.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, a woman leaves work for a week-long vacation, but she never comes back. What happened to Patricia Patti Adkins? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my wunderbar co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. Is that German for absolutely wonderful? I don't know. I'm guessing.
So that is from Tia. And the thing I will say about it is, for whatever reason, I didn't write down what language it is, and I didn't write down what it means. But I'm going to go with Dutch, and I'm going to say it means wonderful. I kind of Googled it and came up with Korean spicy soft tofu stew, which sounds delicious. So if that's what I'm calling
So basically you just
that
made
works as
up
well.
something.
Well, I didn't make it up. I mean, it's a real word, apparently. I just don't actually know what it means. It's more, I could have called you any number of things, Alice.
You are a
but I'm not
lawyer.
sure.
You know that citations matter.
Well, sometimes you just gotta trust your gut.
Oh, I don't know that we should trust our gut today, Brett. So Brett and I, completely separate problems, like get on the phone and we're like, yeah, I've been throwing up all day.
Yeah.
But you know how committed we are? We just literally bit the ginger and sat down to record.
Yeah, and I also had like emergency dental work done today, so I'm
Oh my
doubly
gosh.
committed to this podcast.
That's like, I forgot that happened today too. That's really intense.
Yeah, what can I say?
You're
Y'all
an
owe me, but I'm not gonna hold it against you. It's fine.
Well, I'm glad your tooth is fixed, and I've been throw up free for like 12 hours, so
Yeah, me too.
plenty of time.
Me too. Feeling solid. Hopefully I can make it. I just want to make it through this episode. Afterwards, whatever has to happen can happen, but gonna make it through this episode.
There you go.
And we have, as always, a tragic case, a mysterious case. This is one of those disappearances that is inexplicable on the one hand, and on the other hand, seems like it has a very clear explanation, and yet we've never actually reached any kind of conclusion to this story. So another case we wanted to do, if for no other reason than, hey, maybe there's somebody out there who actually knows what happened to Patti Adkins. And this was a story that was recommended to us by a couple people. And it was funny. Somebody recommended it, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do that. And then as I was doing it, somebody else recommended it. So it was kind of weird. It was as if the universe was aligning for us to do this show. So we're going to do this story on Patti Adkins. Probably a story a lot of y'all are not that familiar with. It's not one that is super well covered in the true crime world. At least I didn't see that it was. There is an investigation discovery episode of Disappeared on this. So if you're into Disappeared, you may have seen that episode. It's pretty good. I recommend everybody check it out. So, Alice, do you want to get us started on this one?
Absolutely. Because I think a lot of us know the kind of person Patti is. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about her before we delve into kind of the tragedy that unfolds. Patti Adkins was a hard-working single mom from Marysville, Ohio. For the last decade, she'd worked at the Honda plant, and she'd worked her way up with promotion after promotion. She was just a hard worker supporting her child, and she'd found love, too, with another worker in the plant, Bob Smith. Now, that's not his real name. His real name hasn't been officially released, so we're just going to call him Bob Smith.
And you can find it if you're interested in knowing who this is. And frankly, I thought about just using his real name, but the police have never officially released it. They don't mention it in the investigation discovery thing. So for the sake of whatever privacy he deserves, we will use a pseudonym.
And you'll see why maybe privacy is needed here, because even though Patti had been dating Bob for over a year, they had to keep their relationship a secret because Bob was married, still married, with 2 children. And the only people who knew about the relationship were Patti's best friend and her sisters. And it's not surprising. They disapproved of the relationship, but Patti was in love and she just wasn't interested in listening to her best friend and her sisters kind of tell her not to be the other woman, to be involved with a married man, a dad. You know, she was just in love.
And I know even as we start this off that there's going to be people out there who automatically disapprove of Patti. And we've seen that. When we did the Kyron Horman case, there were plenty of people who thought, Terry is the kind of person who would kill him because she was cheating. I mean, she wasn't the one cheating, but in the midst of Desiree's pregnancy with Kyron, Terry is in a relationship with his father. And so people are like, anybody who would do that, probably kill somebody too. And there was a lot of backlash and drama, and we don't want that. Let's just say that Patti's in this situation. It's a situation a lot of people have been in, and there are red flags beyond that. I'm not saying I approve of people having affairs or dating people who are married. I think that's generally probably a bad idea and you shouldn't do it. But there are red flags beyond that. So save your judgment for Patti. There's a lot worse things going on here than just the fact that this man she is seeing is married.
But things were looking up. Bob had told Patti that he was going to leave his wife and they were going to be together and build a new life together. And it was all going to start with a week-long vacation they were taking together to Canada. Now, Patti had told her sister Marcia, who would be keeping her daughter, that cell service would be spotty, but she'd see her in a week. But when the week came and went, Patti didn't come back. In fact, she never came back. And her friends and family are left to wonder what happened to Patti Adkins.
And, this is one of those things where, as I said, it's not just that she's in a relationship with a married man. All of a sudden, he's getting ready to leave his wife. They're going to be together. And this is going to be the beginning of everything. And that beginning apparently quickly becomes an end. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the answer here is pretty obvious. And on the one hand, it may well be. But there are at least a couple things about this story that make you wonder if something a little strange is going on. But we'll see as we walk through the timeline and then the evidence of this case. So first, let's do the timeline. Let's start on June 29th, 2001. So at noon that day, Patti drops her daughter off with her ex-husband. So she's planning on going on this trip to Canada. She's going to be gone for a week, like Alice said. And the idea is this is a good opportunity for her daughter to spend some time with her husband, her ex-husband, and then Marcia is going to take over and she'll have her daughter for the rest of the time. Now, as Alice said, she's going to be staying in a cabin in Canada. So kind of in the middle of nowhere. She's not expecting to have any cell service, and she's not expecting there to really be a landline. So she's not going to be able to call.
And Brett, usually I'd be like, oh, that's so weird that not to have cell phone. But I just came from Alaska where I was in the middle of a city. I absolutely thought I was going to have cell service, and I had zero cell service for a week. And it was a little bit jarring. And so I can absolutely see this. It's good she knew ahead of time, but it also seems like no one was expecting to hear from her because of the lack of cell service.
Right, exactly. And that becomes convenient later on, but it is a story that makes sense. And there are details of this case that are really going to leave you scratching your head about how could Patti believe that was a reasonable thing. There are two things in particular I'm thinking of that we're going to talk about. This detail, I can see buying this. I can see thinking that makes total sense. I want to make sure everybody knows this and letting them know. And her family didn't think it was that strange either. It's like, okay, you're going to be gone for a week. Sounds great. So Patti actually catches a ride with a friend to her job because she's leaving her car at home, and her intention is she is going to ride with her boyfriend. At 3:30, Patti clocks into her job at the Honda factory in Marysville, Ohio. Her shift runs until midnight, at which point the plant is scheduled to shut down for a week. The company has a policy of giving all employees a week off around July 4th, which I just thought was great, by the way. I didn't realize they did that. Great policy, Honda. Good for you.
And also notice what's happening just situationally here. When someone's missing, what do we typically see as factors? They don't show up to their work, or you don't hear from them. Someone you normally text with, you never hear from them. And so people ask, like, the police to go do a welfare check. Both of these kind of factors that would normally come in a missing person case have been removed.
It's kind of like when we talked about the Kyron Horman case. And one of the things we pointed out was Terry, either intentionally or by accident, had told the teachers that Kyron had a doctor's appointment that day. And because of that, no one missed him. And that meant the police lost essentially an entire day where they could have been looking for him. This is even worse. So you have a situation where family's not going to miss her because they expect her to be gone. They're not going to miss her if she doesn't get in contact with them because they expect her not to be able to do so. And her coworkers are not going to miss her because the plant's going to be closed for a week. It really is the perfect storm of circumstances in which someone could just disappear. So ordinarily, Patti, being the shift supervisor, she's the person who stays to the very end. She's the one who makes sure everything is clean and tip-top shape before she leaves. But this day, she tells her fellow workers that she really needs to go as soon as the shift is over so she can start this vacation. Her coworkers, they recognize the fact that Patti is the selfless one who always stays till the bitter end. They're perfectly fine with that, and they let her know, we'll have everything taken care of. You can go. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened.
So it's pretty late when she leaves because, again, we're talking about midnight. Now, the next day, or really going into the next day, June 30th, 2001, right after midnight at 12 o'clock and 19 seconds, really, Patti clocks out. So as you can see, shift ends, she immediately goes and clocks out. And employees actually see her dash up the stairs and out into the parking lot. And this is the last time that anyone sees her. I think the fact that she's dashing out the door shows you like how excited she is about this, right? She doesn't want to miss a single minute of this vacation. She wants it to get started. And it makes sense. She's had to have this relationship completely under wraps. It really can't exist in the public. And she's a mother. She's always having to probably rush home to her daughter. But in this situation, someone's watching her daughter. She doesn't have to rush home to anyone. This is her opportunity to finally kind of live the life with her boyfriend that she had probably dreamed of. Now, at around 2:30 a.m., according to his wife, Bob arrives at home. About a week later, on July 8th, 2001, at noon, Patti's sister Marcia was expecting Patti to come pick up her 7-year-old daughter. Now, her daughter had split the week, as we said earlier, between Patti's ex's home and Marcia's home. And remember, she wasn't expecting to hear from her all day, but around noon was when the daughter was supposed to be picked up by Patti. So when she doesn't show up, at 12:30, Marcia calls Patti's home, but there's no answer. After a couple more hours of calling again and again, she finally called Bob's home. Now, Bob's wife answered the phone, but Bob wasn't there.
And to a certain extent, this is actually kind of comforting for Marcia because she thinks, oh, they probably just are running late. He's not home yet. They haven't made it home yet. I'm not going to be that concerned. But as the minutes tick on by and turn into hours, she becomes more and more concerned. By 5 o'clock, she's calling Bob's home again. And this time, he answers. And he tells Marcia something that is entirely shocking to her and leads her to an immediate conclusion. He says he doesn't know where Patti was. And in fact, there was no reason he would know because, according to him, he's not in a relationship with Patti, and Marcia must be mistaken about them being in a relationship. At which point, Marcia responds, "What did you do to her?" She is immediately incredibly suspicious of Bob for obvious reasons. At this point, Bob hangs up the phone. Marcia gives it a little bit more time, but by 7 o'clock, she has called the police and reported Patti missing. Now, Marcia's not just going to sit around and wait for the police to find something. She stays up all night. Patti still doesn't come home. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Marcia actually calls Bob's home again. This time she speaks to Bob's wife, and she tells her everything that she knew about the relationship between Patti and Bob. At some point, Bob takes the phone and once again says he doesn't know anything about Patti. She's completely wrong. He doesn't know what she's talking about. But this phone call doesn't end the way you might expect it to end if that were true. If it were true that he knew nothing, I mean, I would be like, look, crazy lady, I don't know what you're talking about, but stop calling me, and hang up the phone. But that's not what Bob does. He actually spends the next 45 minutes talking to Marcia and asking her questions about things that she supposedly knows about him. And it turns out Marcia's able to tell him just about everything about his life, about his kids, about his job, about his side business, just everything in his life, which I think confirms to Bob, if he didn't know already, that indeed Marcia knows exactly what was going on with her sister.
Like, how weird is that, right? Because in fact, if you had some crazy lady calling your wife in the middle of the night accusing you of some affair that you really had nothing to do, why would you ask those questions? I mean, I think my response would be like, okay, stop calling or we're going to call the cops on you. It's the middle of the night and you're accusing me of something heinous and untrue, rather than like, how much does she actually know? Because Bob may have thought that Patti kept everything secret from everybody. And even if she did tell her sister, she may have only told her some little part. So he's trying to like gauge basically how much he needs to lie about the relationship, I think.
And look, if you've ever been in a relationship that you really shouldn't have been in, or if you've ever had close friends who've been in a relationship they really shouldn't be in. One of the parties, probably the one who has the most to lose, has urged the other one to tell no one. This is between us. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell your family. And of course, they always end up telling people because that's just the way it goes. And you can imagine Bob's in the situation where he's told Patti, don't tell anybody about us. This could be a big problem for me until I'm able to divorce my wife. This could be an issue. And Bob, he was trying, as he told Patti, he was trying to set up his finances so that when the divorce happened, his wife wouldn't get everything. That was one of the things he was doing. At least that's what he told her. So you can imagine why he would, well, at least the reason he would give her for keeping this all secret. And Bob, seems like, believed that Patti hadn't told anyone about their relationship. And it's true, she didn't tell many people, but she did tell her sisters and she did tell her best friend. And now it feels like Bob is finding out that Patti did not keep this entirely a secret. And in fact, there are people who know far more about him than he would have been comfortable with. But nevertheless, he sticks to his story. And we talked about this in one of our previous episodes, how if you got a story, you might as well just stick to it because changing your story is never going to work out for you. The next day, the police interview Bob, and he denies any involvement with Patti. He sticks to his story. Not having an affair, not in a relationship with anybody, don't know what they're talking about, know nothing about what happened to Patti. And the sort of investigation continues, but it quickly goes cold. And obviously, when you hear this in 2023, talking about a case from 2001, it's not surprising that soon thereafter, in 2006, Patti was officially declared dead. And to this point, no one has ever been able to figure out exactly what happened to Patti.
So sad. I mean, there's no answers for her daughter. There's no answers for her sisters. This really is just such a sad situation. And it's not surprising that the police have no lead into where Patti is. Like, is she in Canada? Is she close by? There's a week in between the time that anyone even knew that she was missing. A lot can happen in that time. And so if I were the police, I literally don't even know where to start.
Well, I know where I'd start, but
I mean, the Honda plant and then someone's house. But we'll get into that.
You could start at her house, which seems like a smart place to start as well.
You could start there. So we've gone through the timeline, and that's really it. Because of kind of the lack of communication in that week span, there's not really much information that we have. But there are a lot of unusual aspects to discuss. And let's start with her house, Brett. The police show up at Patti's house after she's reported missing, and they find nothing amiss. The car is in the driveway because, remember, she didn't take her car to the Honda plant that day. She rode with a friend. Her clothes are all there, and there's no sign of a struggle or anything that's out of place. And police conclude that whatever happened, it didn't happen there. And if Patti disappeared on her own accord, she took absolutely nothing with her.
Which is always an important point to make because there are always people who are going to believe that this person disappeared on their own. And it does happen. There was just recently a case of someone who disappeared about 10 years ago and died recently a couple hundred miles away. And nobody knew that he was the guy who had disappeared, who just walked out on his life. So it's not as if it doesn't happen. But those stories are remarkable for a reason. And whereas in his case, there were some signs that he may have disappeared on his own, in this case, there are not. It appears that Patti really took nothing with her. If she was going to start a life anew, she was doing it basically with the clothes on her back. And she was doing it while abandoning her daughter and her family. Could happen, but there's no sign of it.
And this is like a life tip for everybody. You can tell how close she is with her sister by the fact that she told her sister, like, not just that she was in a relationship with Bob, but all the details of it, right? This is like a very close relationship where you divulge everything because you're excited about that relationship. So not only did she confide in her sister, but her sister had Bob's home number. I'm sure that Bob did not know anyone had his phone number from Patti because this was supposed to be a secret relationship. And who's at his home? His family, who doesn't know about this relationship. And so thank goodness, by the way, that Marcia had Bob's phone number. But I think that just shows you that Patti isn't this like loner, right? She has a lot of connections and tight connections with the people in her life.
And let's just be clear. Patti is either a very disturbed person or she's in a relationship with Bob. right? I mean, there's the level of detail and the stories that she tells to her sister. If they're not true, because that's the only other option, right? I mean, if Bob's telling the truth, the only other option is Patti is delusional and making it all up. And she would have to be delusional on a really high level of delusion for that to be true. And as we continue to talk about this, I think you'll see why, even though that is a possibility and it's something you have to consider, the chances of that with every little piece of evidence become lesser and lesser. So Patti, as we said, she didn't drive to the Honda plant the day she disappeared. Instead, she caught a ride. And the plan, when the day was over, was for her to leave with Bob, which makes sense. They're going to Canada together. They're leaving that night. Why bother with two cars? But it wasn't as simple as climbing into the passenger seat. There is a reason that Patti needed to leave right at midnight. Yes, she was excited about starting this vacation, but she really needed to be out of there before everybody because Bob was also giving a ride to a friend of his. He carpooled every day with a friend of his that lived close to him, and that friend did not know about the relationship with Patti. So the plan was for Patti to climb into the bed of the truck. Now you might think, well, won't the guy just see her in the bed of the truck? Well, Bob had a plan for that. He had installed a cover on his truck, a tonneau cover on his truck. And if you don't know what that is, this is one of those thick covers that cover the bed of a truck, and it's flush with the top of the truck bed. You've certainly seen these before, but it's not like a camper style cover that kind of forms a shell over the bed where you have like a dome. This is like a flat, heavy cover.
You can't sit up in it if you're sitting in the bed of the truck. You have to lay down. It's like a coffin,
Kinda.
I would imagine. I've never been in the bed of a truck when it's had one of those covers, but it's like it's unnatural. It's incredibly unnatural to sit.
I would not want to be in that.
I would not either. I mean, because
as you said, you would have to essentially lay down. I mean, you'd be laying down, either on your stomach or on your back. In the dark, underneath this cover, while someone's driving down the road.
By the way, like, if my boyfriend told me to do that, I would be so sad. Like, it's not just like hiding. It's like so demeaning how hidden you are.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, there are things. The going to the cabin with no cell service, maybe it's a red flag if you're really sort of intuitive, but this is a red flag. I mean, this is the first really big red flag that you're going to have to do this. You couldn't just meet him somewhere. You could imagine, why can't I drive to your house? Well, obviously I'm married, so you can't leave your car at my house. Why can't you come to my house? Well, I've got to drop my friend off who lives 40 minutes away, so then I'd have to drive back to pick you up, and that's just way too much inconvenience for me or whatever. But why not just say, I mean, I don't know. You could just tell your friend, she's carpooling too. I'm going to drop her off after I drop you off. I mean, there are other options here, but this is by far the worst possible option. And so she's supposed to stay in the back of this truck for 40 minutes while they drive to this friend's house and drop him off. And then after that, at some point, she would get out of the back and get in the front with Bob. And she's so smitten with her boyfriend and she's so excited about this trip that she is willing to do this, what seems to be a just insane ask. It's something you should not ask your girlfriend to do, but Bob is committed.
Now, the police would interview the friend who rode in that truck with Bob and Marcia unknowingly. According to him, Bob and the friend stopped by Burger King to pick up some food. So far the testimony is Bob was taking his friend home. Now afterwards, oh my gosh, if it wasn't just like a quick drop off, like you're going to go and eat and leave your girlfriend in the bed of the truck, it kind of gets a little insane. Now, afterwards, Bob dropped the friend off at his house about 30 miles from the plant in Canton, Ohio. And then Bob was home by 2:30. Now, the problem is that trip should not have taken 2.5 hours from Canton to Bob's home. Bob and his friend had an explanation, though. They said that they waited 45 minutes in line at Burger King, which is a very long time at a very busy Burger King at 12:30 or so. Now, the police did talk to the Burger King manager, who said that it wouldn't have been busy at that time. Makes sense, middle of the night. And there's absolutely no way that they would have had to wait 45 minutes at that time of night.
I don't know what y'all got going on in Marysville, Ohio, but Burger King, maybe not much, because Burger King apparently is hopping, according to Bob.
I've never waited 45 minutes at a Burger King any hour or day.
I can't imagine a situation in which I would wait 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't care how hungry I am. We got to get on.
You could probably make a frozen pizza by that point.
And just to go back to this, according to Patti, I mean, once again, you have to believe that Patti is really delusional and that she has climbed into this truck on her own accord and Bob doesn't know anything about it. Or you have to believe that Bob is just really inconsiderate. Because as Alice said, he's not just driving the 30 miles. He's like swinging by to Burger King to pick up food. And when they tell him it's going to be 45 minutes, he's like, that's cool. I got nowhere to be.
I have nothing to do. No one in the bed of my truck.
So that's what you have to believe happened. And then you have the Burger King manager who's like, yeah, it wasn't that busy, which makes sense because it was the middle of the night.
And let's put all this together. So let's say that Patti knew she was about to not just go on the trip, but about to go climb into the bed of a truck for the next couple of hours. Would she have clocked out 19 seconds after the shift was over, grab her stuff, and quite literally run down the stairs and out the door, with sheer excitement to jump into the bed of the truck? Maybe, but that's weird. To be that excited to have to spend the next 2 hours in essentially a coffin.
There's no way. I don't care what happened here. Bob didn't tell her it was going to be that long.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there are reasons to think that this wasn't some sort of, they were going to go on a trip and then something went horribly wrong and someone was killed and they didn't go on the trip. But you can imagine that if Patti was in the back of that car and then 2.5 hours later, Bob gets her out of there, a fight could have ensued. I can imagine someone being very angry that had gone down. But in reality, I don't think that's probably what happened. So let's talk about the truck. So Bob drove his truck to the Honda plant that night, and this was unusual. He did not ordinarily drive his truck, which he used for his other job, to the Honda plant. Bob has another job, and that's going to become important. He's sort of a co-owner of a mechanic shop, and this truck was used for that purpose. Now, obviously, why would he take the truck that night? Well, this seems to confirm what Patti was saying, is that he needed to have a vehicle that she could hide in the back of easily. And the truck makes sense. Patti can't climb into the trunk without his help, and probably wouldn't want to do that anyway. But this is perfect. If he has the truck, she can jump in the back of the truck and hide. So another strike against the notion that this is just all a lie by Patti and took Bob sort of unawares. So what about Bob's wife? So the police did interview her, and she was entirely incredulous about the affair. She didn't believe it at all. And she told the police that Bob went to work every day and came home every day like clockwork, exactly when you would expect it. And then frankly, there was simply no time for him to have an affair. And I feel this because I've often said I don't understand how people have an affair because I'm both too busy and too tired to have an affair. I mean, in addition to loving my wife and being committed to her, I just can't imagine having the time and energy to put forward to being in another relationship. So I kind of get what Bob's wife is saying. And she's like, look, there just wasn't any time for him to do that because I knew where he was all the time. He was either at the Honda plant or he's at his other business, and there's just no question about that. So she claimed this is impossible. There's no way he could have done this. And she said he certainly wasn't going to go to Canada that week. He had come home that night, as he normally did, and spent much of the week doing projects that they had planned to do. And in fact, one of those projects, which we'll come back to, was pouring some concrete in the backyard.
Well, so what we know definitely then is Bob wasn't gone that week. And Patti really probably just disappeared that night, whatever happened, unless she somehow went to Canada by herself, but she had no way to get there by herself. And the other thing to note is that Bob never intended to go to Canada because he had planned these projects to do this week. He hadn't planned to, say, be on a business trip. So those are interesting things to note from Bob's wife's testimony. what about Patty's clothes? We know that Patti didn't drive to work herself, and when her coworkers saw her leaving, they actually didn't see any luggage either. According to Marcia, there was a reason for this. Bob had told her that they would buy all the clothes and accessories that Patti needed when they got to Canada, and the only thing Patti brought was a small teal-colored duffel bag with something she bought from Victoria's Secret. And now this bag has never been found.
This is red flag number 2, by the way.
I've never gone on any vacation and not brought clothes other than lingerie. And it would be a red flag to me, especially Canada. I mean, it is summer, but like Canada is rugged, especially if you're going to a cabin with no cell phone service. I would imagine it's pretty rural. You're probably like in the woods. It's probably a situation where you're going to do some hiking or at least have to trudge through the wilderness to get to your cabin, in which case it might make sense to bring like long pants, you know, so the brush doesn't scratch you, and hiking boots, which are heavy and expensive to buy new. And like, if you're out there, you probably don't need a lot of clothes. It's probably pretty casual, right? You're not in the middle of town going out to dinner every night. So I would think you just get normal like jeans and windbreakers and hiking boots. Kind of a strange thing to wait to go up there and buy, because it's not like you're buying ball gowns to get to go to fancy events.
And Patty's in her work clothes. She's in her white Honda jumper with her name on it. You know, I don't know if she's wearing anything under that, but that's what she's wearing that night. And the notion that she wouldn't even have a change of clothes. We don't blame victims on this podcast because no one deserves to have a crime committed against them. But it is important for people to think about sort of the red flags and the danger signs, I think, in their own lives. Just because if you can take something from these cases that helps you and might make you safer, at least something good came from it. The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy.
All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. You guys, I'm really excited to share with you my love of Thrive Market, which is my go-to for all of my grocery and household essentials. And the convenience of getting it all shipped quickly to my doorstep is a huge time saver. This is a great market. I can not only get my kids' favorite healthy snacks, but I can also get clean makeup, lipstick, eyeliner, mascara, you name it, all from the same market, shipped to my door. And as a Thrive Market member, I can save money on every single order. On average, I save over 30% each time. That was so cool to check out and see how much I'm saving without even realizing and not compromising on the quality. On top of the massive savings on each order, Thrive Market has a deals page that changes daily, and it gives me cash back on so many brands. And they have a price match guarantee.
Alice, these days, not only are things more expensive, but it just seems like I don't have much time. And that's why I love Thrive Market, because it not only saves me money, they also save me time. I love the filters on their website and on their app. They have over 70. Whether you're looking for certified gluten-free snacks or non-toxic cleaning essentials, you guys know I like doing keto. I can find everything I want, from meat to seafood to artificial sweeteners. And when you join Thrive Market, you're also helping a family in need with their 1-for-1 membership matching program. You join, they give. Join Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. Go to thrivemarket.com/prosecutors for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/prosecutors, thrivemarket.com/prosecutors. prosecutors. Guys, when it comes to personal hygiene, who has time to read that long list of ingredients on the back of the bottle? Some ingredients I can't even pronounce, and you guys know that's true. If you're like me and care about what goes on your body, then it's time to try Native personal care products like I did. Every Native product is thoughtfully formulated to keep you feeling and smelling fresh all day long. You know Native for their aluminum-free deodorant. Native keeps their ingredients list bare naked with ingredients you understand, like coconut oil, shea butter, and baking soda. Native deodorant checks a lot of boxes: 72-hour odor protection, naturally derived ingredients, and a smooth, residue-free application. Native also offers a variety of scents, with new and limited edition scents being released all the time.
Brett, this is so true. When you use Native, you'll smell amazing all day long thanks to their long-lasting scents. You want to smell spicy and woodsy or clean and fresh? Well, Native has a scent option for everyone. I actually love the cashmere and rain option. My husband also loves it. He likes the cabin collection of warm cider and cinnamon. And let me tell you, it smells great for both of us. Now is the time to make the switch from an antiperspirant to Native. When you visit their site, you can discover all their fresh scents and maybe even try out one of their body washes while you're at it. Smell and feel fresh all day long with Native. Get 20% off your first order by going to nativedeo.com/prosecutors or use promo code prosecutors at checkout. That's nativedeo.com/prosecutors or use promo code prosecutors at checkout for 20% off your first order.
Alice, some things change with the new year, but I'll tell you one thing that didn't change, and that's my love for June's Journey. This is a game that anyone who listens to this podcast is going to love. It combines your love of true crime and your love of solving mysteries. And there are a few things as captivating as a family mystery, especially one with as many twists and turns as June's Journey. Play as June Parker and investigate beautifully detailed scenes set in the decadent 20s to solve her sister's murder. With a mystery that runs this deep, you'll keep coming back to explore new scenes, knowing the next clue is always in reach. I want you to download June's Journey, and I want you to play to Chapter 2. I promise you, you are going to love it.
You really are going to love it. I think Brett and I spend so much time on our phones, and half the time you'll find us playing June's Journey, because June's Journey has tons of fun and unique features to keep you entertained. You can build your very own island estate with expansive gardens and beautiful buildings. You can chat and play with or against other players by joining a detective club. And also you can collect scraps of information to fill your photo album and learn more about each character. Pick up where you left off to uncover new secrets or start your investigation today and download June's Journey. Available on Android and iOS mobile devices as well as on PC through Facebook Games.
Are you looking for a new job or want a career change? Look no further than Monster.com. Need a little help standing out? Our expert resume writing services will make sure you shine. Want to brush up on your interview skills? Engage with our AI interview prep tool. Want some advice on negotiating your new salary? Visit our salary tools and extensive library of career advice articles, and you'll have all the tips and tricks you'll need to succeed. Visit Monster.com today and take the first step towards your career. Monster.com. Find your right job fit.
When you look at what's going on with Patti, it is a dangerous relationship. Somebody said, I was talking about that fight that people got into on the internet about whether or not the fact that Terry was involved in extramarital affairs, whether that had any bearing on whether she was a murderer or not. And some people were very adamant that it has no bearing whatsoever. The reality of the situation is affairs are something you often see in murder cases. The fact that someone is having an affair doesn't mean they're more likely to be a murderer. And the fact someone is involved with someone who's married doesn't mean they're necessarily more likely to be murdered. Not saying that, but as we all know, and as sad as it is to say this, the most dangerous thing in a woman's life is a man. And unfortunately, far too often, women are killed by people they love or people they are with. And so I think it's worth it to think about sort of red flags. And this one, I mean, climbing into the back of the truck, that was pretty bad. That's a pretty bad red flag. This one seems really bad. I mean, this one is like, I want to make sure you have nothing
traceable.
I'm not going to have to get rid of anything because you're not going to have anything. You're just going to have yourself. And I know when you're in love with somebody, you never view things like this through that lens. But wow, this was, she told her family about this. Her family knew about all these things. That's how we know, because they've told the police and they've been public about this. And they were like, this seems really strange. This doesn't seem right. But Patti had an explanation for it. And at the end of the day, her family was just kind of like, well, she's a grown woman. If she thinks it's okay, I guess it's okay. And wow, I know it's tough to be in that situation, but man, I mean, this is a huge red flag. It really is.
Yeah. And here's an interesting thing. Like, we have no reason, well, not no reason, but if Patti had kept this to herself and not told anyone, this would have been more confusing, right? We would have been more like, wait, did she really plan to go to Canada? But the fact that she told her sister this, what Bob told her about buying clothes and accessories, is really important to know, because that's tying it to Bob. But I don't know. So far, you either believe Bob or you believe Patti through her sister, Marcia. But what was going on there?
Well, we're about to see some concrete evidence of their relationship. As I said, Bob was completely adamant that he was not in a relationship with Patti. His wife said the same thing. Bob didn't even own a cabin in Canada, so he had no idea what all these people were talking about, and he told the police that, and he never backed down from that position. And as far as I know, to this day, he denies he was ever in a relationship with Patti. Now, he did admit that Patti had sent him a birthday card, and he had actually ripped it up because he didn't want his wife to find it, and he was afraid that she would become suspicious something was going on between them, even though nothing was. It's never clear if Bob ever specifically says this lady had something wrong with her and she thought we were in a relationship, but we weren't. But it feels like that is definitely what he's sort of implying with this card thing. She sent me this card, it was inappropriate, I tore it up, didn't want my wife to think anything was going on when it wasn't. The police were certainly suspicious, and they actually ended up getting a search warrant, which they executed on July 13th on Bob's home. There, they found what they described as a cell phone and a T-shirt that Patti had purchased for Bob, and that's not all. They also found a letter from Patti to Bob talking about their relationship and how much Patti was excited about being with him. Arguably, any of these things could still be sort of a delusional Patti, believing she was in a relationship she wasn't in, but they certainly make that harder to believe.
Absolutely. Especially because if you're going to rip up the one card, why don't you rip up the rest of it? And also, a card is a one-time thing. All these other things, it's like a pattern that you would think you'd at least be like, hey, wife, this lady keeps sending me stuff. I promise nothing's going on, but she literally cannot stop sending me things. It's strange that you would keep the rest of the stuff. Now, according to Marcia, Bob had been taking money from Patti. In addition to his job at Honda, Bob, as we mentioned, has a side business as a mechanic. Now, Bob had a partner in his business and he wanted to buy him out. Patti had cashed out her 401k, sold stock, and taken out a second mortgage on her home and money out of her account. So basically, she is cashing in everything, her retirement, her home, her stock, absolutely everything she owns, in order to loan it to Bob to allegedly allow him to buy out his partner. In total, she'd given him $90,000, or at least that's what we're told, because there's no record of this money going to Bob. However, family members claim to have found empty cash bands in Patti's home, indicating that most of the money was given in cash, which of course is not traceable. Now, Patti had told Marcia that they had to be careful lest his wife notice the money coming in. And so Patti had also told Marcia that she was going to have Bob start paying her back for all the money he'd borrowed from her, and the payments were to start in July of 2001. So the month they were going to take this trip. That's a lot of money for someone for a single mother, as you can tell, because it's not like she just had this sitting around. She had to liquidate basically all of her assets in order to reach that $90,000.
And Patti's 29 years old. She's 29 years old.
That's impressive she has that much money.
And that's what her family said. Her family said, look, she was great with money and she was really committed to saving her money. And until Bob comes along, she never would have done anything like this. And she'd started off basically at the bottom at Honda. She'd worked herself up to a shift supervisor, but
you can imagine for a very long time, she wasn't making that much money, and she's raising a daughter by herself. We all know how expensive kids are. So yeah, the fact that she had saved $90,000 is pretty impressive. And it goes somewhere. The police have been able to identify $90,000 that left Patti. Now, we don't know where it went because we can't trace it. Like Alice said, you can't trace cash. There's no evidence of this going into any accounts of Bob's. So it's a little unclear exactly where this money went. And I'll say this, $90,000 is a lot of money to get and there be no trace of it. No suspicious deposits into your account. No suspicious purchases that the police are able to identify, find the person who, you bought it from and say, oh yeah, he paid $10,000 in cash. And this kind of evidence is the very kind of evidence that often puts people in jail or in prison for a very long time, because even though cash is not traceable, when you see that money, when you see big deposits going in, you see big withdrawals coming out, that tells a story, and it tells a story you can tell to a jury. But we don't have that here. So if the money went to Bob, he was smart about it. And you see with Patti, some of you, most of you probably, have either read Gone Girl or seen the movie Gone Girl. You would basically have to believe that Patti is devious to the extent of the woman in that movie or in that book, where she has really planned this out to either frame Bob for her eventual disappearance. The $90,000 didn't go to Bob because she used it to start a new life, because the whole time she was planning on framing Bob for her murder because he rejected her. You would basically have to believe that to think that Bob is telling the truth. It's the old Occam's razor thing, right? Either this is one of the craziest true crime stories you've ever heard, or it is very, very typical. The police obviously did not think this is the craziest true crime story you've ever heard. They were focused on Bob. They'd already had one search warrant, and they decided to execute another one. Now, there are conflicting reports on this. They either executed another search warrant or Bob consented to the search of his home and his business. Let me just go ahead and tell you, if you think that's significant that he would consent, it's not. People consent all the time when they are absolutely guilty of a crime and know there's evidence of their guilt, wherever's going to be searched. Not really clear to me why people do that, but they do it all the time. I don't know if they think the police will miss it and then they'll assume that they're innocent or what, but they do it all the time. But however they got it, the police really went to town on Bob's property. There were some ponds. They drained them. They searched them. They ended up draining and searching some ponds on neighbors' property. They dug up the yard. And you remember that concrete we talked about. One of the projects that he undertook that week, he was supposed to be in Canada, was to pour some new concrete. And the police, when they saw this, they were pretty excited to search it. And as a matter of fact, they had cadaver dogs run through the property. And where did they go? They went to the concrete. And so the police are like, this is it. We're going to dig up this concrete, and there the body is going to be. But unfortunately, when they did dig up the concrete, they didn't find anything. No body, no evidence of a body, which makes you wonder what exactly is going on here. Was there a body there that had been moved, or did the dogs just get it wrong, which, as great as dogs are, sometimes they do get it wrong.
But man, how suspicious, right? Like when you hear about the pouring of the concrete, the first thing you think is, interesting that you had planned to pour concrete the same week that this woman who's supposed to be having a relationship with you disappears. And that's another thing to note, is that the pouring of the concrete, I think, had been planned. It wasn't a spur of the moment, let's pour some concrete. This was a home project that Bob and his wife had planned on doing. And so this is, again, something that's thought out in advance. Now, I've never gotten rid of a body before, but we have seen spoliation of evidence all the time, Brett. And it is hard to make some person disappear completely, but it's not impossible, right? And so maybe the dogs got it wrong. Maybe something about the new scent of the concrete threw them off, or they did hit on something, but whatever had been there had been removed. And the concrete masked some smell, but not all the smell. Remember that whole truck cover thing? Well, the police find the truck, and it did not have a cover on it. And when police search Bob's business, they find the cover, and Bob admits that he ordered the cover and put it on the day that Patti went missing. A week later, he took the cover off, and Bob said he bought the cover to protect fishing gear. Now, Bob had no explanation for why he'd taken the cover off. A service manager at his business said he was surprised that Bob bought this kind of cover, as they were always carrying equipment in the back of the truck that just wouldn't fit under the cover, right? We've talked about this cover. It's like you button it in, basically, so it's flush against the bed of the truck, and it's a very kind of narrow height. And if it's a work van, you've probably seen this like on the road. There's like ladders and other equipment coming out of the truck. That's why it's helpful to have a truck when you own this type of a business, because of the oddly shaped and large equipment that you often have to transport. So in other words, there wasn't really a work reason for this cover, even though this truck was used for work reasons. And if Bob used it to cover his fishing gear, why did the fishing gear only need to be covered for a week and then not again after that? So the police took the cover and they tested it, and they found hairs consistent with Patti's cat. They also found a drop of blood, but it was too small to test at the time without consuming the entire sample. Remember, we've talked about this. DNA is consumable, and so you can't test a piece of DNA repeatedly. Each time you test it, it burns it up, especially if it's a very small sample. It may be so small that you use it up all in one sample. And so if they're not sure that they can get usable information out of it, they may hold off on testing it until the technology gets better, because once you expend that sample, it's all gone. Now, it's unclear whether advancing technology has allowed them to test the blood at this point, but they do still have the blood sample.
And I actually have an update on that. I was able to find out that they have indeed now tested the blood, and unfortunately, it was Bob's. So it was not helpful in the case. Obviously, if it had been Patti's, that would have been huge. You still have the hairs that are consistent with the cat, which is something, but it's not as good.
That's actually a huge thing, right? Because if Bob is saying that this crazy lady had no relationship with him, it's actually weirder for her cat's hair to be on his cover, because a cat probably lives at home, and it would be easier to have your own DNA come off of you, like to slough off your own DNA because you have more of your own DNA, than to slough off contact DNA. Because like if the cat DNA is on her sweater and then it gets on the cover, that's like one removed. So I think that's really interesting that it's the cat DNA.
No, I agree. This is one of those cases where this one's pretty close to being able to prosecute. And I think this is also one of those cases where the police really are hoping for one more piece of evidence. We talked about those cases before. This is definitely one of those where they need at least one more piece of evidence. We know that Bob eventually, he took a polygraph test. He failed it. You can read into that whatever you want to. We've made our position on polygraphs pretty clear, but nevertheless, he did fail it. And shortly thereafter, he quit his job at the Honda plant. And as far as anyone knows, to this day, Bob maintains that he did not have a relationship with Patti, and he did not have anything to do with her disappearance. And it is unclear how, if at all, he has explained the evidence of their relationship and her presence in the truck. As I said, I don't know if his position is this lady's crazy and was making all this up or not, but it would almost have to be something like that in order for Bob's story to be true.
Those are some pretty big things to not have an explanation for, though. I would say if that were my husband, I'd have a lot of questions. Now, Patti Adkins would be 50 years old today. She's described as being 5'8" and weighing 120 pounds. So a slim, tall woman. And this was at the time of her disappearance. Obviously, it's been quite some time since she disappeared, 21 years. She does have pierced ears, a pierced belly button, and a tattoo of bluish-green Smith placed horizontally on her lower back. If you have any information on the circumstances surrounding Patti's case, please, please, please call Lieutenant Jeff Stiers at 937-645-4126. You can leave anonymous information if you want. They have a voicemail on the Union County Sheriff's Office Crime Tip Hotline, which is 937-642-7653. Guys, if this story You're gritting your teeth and you're yelling at the speakers because you're like, there seems to be enough information there. There's obviously not quite enough information. And if you were at a Burger King that night, if you were one of the employees who stuck around the parking lot and saw something, if you got a weird call the next day from one of these people, now's the time to talk about it because time has passed. There's been no trace of Patti. Each day that slips away, I think it's harder and harder to kind of see justice be had, but the police are so very interested in hearing the tips. So if you know anything, please call Lieutenant Stiers at 937-645-4126 or the hotline at 937-642-7653.
And we hope somebody does have some information. And obviously, you can also reach out to us if you don't want to talk to someone else. We're always happy to talk to you guys about anything you have. And hopefully somebody will have a tip that'll solve the case. Until then, though, all we have are potential theories about what might have happened in this case.
And so let's talk about this first theory. It's that Patti, really was going on this vacation and she really was in a relationship with Bob, but someone intercepted her on her way out of the plant before she was able to get to Bob. And she didn't disappear on her own accord, but someone made her disappear. She was just an unlucky person. It is midnight when she's leaving. It's pretty dark. It's pretty late. There's a reason that a lot of crimes happen at night is because fewer people are out, fewer witnesses. It's low visibility. So that could have happened, except that there's just absolutely no evidence of this. And also, I guess you'd have to believe that she really wasn't with Bob, because I would think that even if Bob wanted to deny the relationship, if the love of his life or his girlfriend went missing, he would at least report it, just as a coworker is reported missing. I was supposed to give her a ride home and X, Y, and Z and let somebody know, but that obviously never happened. And so while that's a possibility, I think there's just no evidence that points to it. And you would think that at least Bob would react differently if he had been waiting for her, say, by his truck and she never showed up.
And even if you think Bob is a scumbag who would do that, who would leave and go to the Burger King and take 2.5 hours and then either didn't realize she wasn't in the truck, or when he finally gets somewhere and he opens up the cover and she's not there, and would just be like, oh, well, tough for her. I'm just not going to tell anybody. Even if you think that, the problem is that would mean that everything else is true, right? That would mean they did have this relationship and they were going to Canada, which would also seem to mean that Bob would have needed to have already made the excuse to the wife that, hey, I'm going off for a week. And then somehow it gets canceled at the last minute. And he's like, oh, never mind. I'm going to stay home and do projects instead. But he didn't do that. So the idea that someone else could have been involved, that someone else could have intercepted her and prevented this weekend or this week from happening, it just doesn't seem plausible at all. And I think really leaves you with only the two alternatives that we've talked about up to this point, which is either Patti really just had a deep-seated mental issue here to the level of craziest fiction, or Bob did something to her. I think those are your two options. And you start with the first one. There's nothing definitive that you can point to that proves beyond any doubt that Patti didn't make all this up. So it's possible that Chris talked about how Patti would flirt with him on the line. She could be doing that. She could be telling her friends she's in a relationship with him. She could be sending him letters and everything else about how great and wonderful he is and how she wants to be in a relationship with him. And he just, for whatever reason, just sort of thinks to himself, wow, that lady, crazy, but I'm just going to move on with my life, right? I mean, any of that there's nothing we can point to. She even could have climbed in the back of that truck and got the cat hair on the cover. That is possible. And then use the $90,000 to disappear. She's so angry at this man that she's willing to fake her own death to frame him, leave her family and her daughter behind, and use the money that she's been taking out to start a new life. I guess that's possible. I guess there's a world in which that could be true. But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence here. The cover is a big one, because in order for that to be true, you have to assume the cover is just a coincidence, that Bob really did buy an expensive cover These are expensive covers. This wouldn't have been a cheap purchase. To put on his work truck to protect his fishing gear. From what exactly, I don't know, because fishing gear gets wet. I mean, that's sort of the whole point of it. But he's protecting his fishing gear for a week, but then takes it off. Just so happens to put it on the very day that Patti is going to climb into the back of his truck, which she wouldn't even know he was going to have, right? Because he doesn't normally drive the truck. But she's going to luck out on this. She's planned everything else, but she's going to luck out that he just so happens to drive the truck, that on that day, he just so happened to have put a cover on. So she's going to be able to hide in the back of the truck and surprise him at some point. Or not surprise him, just disappear into the darkness after climbing into the truck for the purposes of leaving some cat hair behind so that one day the police will believe he did it. You have to think that all that is true, which might work in a out there Ben Affleck movie. Probably not going to work in real life. That's probably not what happened. And you basically have to believe that something like that went down to think that this is some made-up thing by Patti. But to believe that Bob had something to do with it's a lot easier. And when you read about this case online, a lot of times people try and give Bob an out. One of the things they say is, well, maybe she suffocated. She was underneath the cover and she suffocated. Maybe it was carbon dioxide, which you could imagine being possible, being locked in that, as Alice said, coffin. Maybe she overheated. It was only 78 degrees that night, which is a warm night, but probably not hot enough that you would succumb to the elements. But once again, the problem with that is you have to assume that the rest of it's true. You have to assume that trip was going to happen. And it got interrupted because she died. He freaked out and did something about it.
And the biggest thing against that is everything that he had planned with his wife. I mean, this man was not going to be gone for a week. And that is huge. So whether you believe there was an affair or not, he certainly wasn't going away for a week. And that's just huge, right? If this were an accident, he would have planned to be away or have had an excuse for being away. He had planned to pour concrete with his wife.
I agree with you 100%. To me, if Bob was having an affair with Patti, he killed her. That's my position on this. That's my opinion. If they were having an affair, he murdered her. And he murdered her for a combination of she was getting too clingy, he couldn't get rid of her, and he really couldn't get rid of her, not just because she would tell his wife, but because of the $90,000. He had taken $90,000 from her that he was supposed to start repaying the very month that she went missing. Now, she goes missing over the July 4th holiday. When is he supposed to be paying this money back? July. And what a coincidence.
I mean, I'm going to go even so far as to say that, unfortunately, she may have just been used. Like, he may have seen her, if they had a relationship, as someone who was responsible with money, who had assets, and maybe this was the plan all along. Get all the money, because this is not a situation where he missed payments for multiple months, right? It was, he hadn't even missed a payment yet. And I don't know that she would have been like threatening him, because remember, she's still all rosy about the relationship. She hasn't let on to anyone who knows about this relationship that there are problems. It's not, he hasn't paid me back yet. Nothing like that. The relationship is at its peak, which lends me to believe if there was a relationship, that all along it was not about her. It was about using her and then disposing of her, because there was a lot of liability, not only financially, but obviously with his family.
And it reminds you a lot of the Lady Vanishes case, Marion Barter. I mean,
yes.
A man who sells a dream to someone who wants to believe that dream is true. In this case, a young woman who's raising her daughter on her own, she wants that Hallmark movie ending where she meets the guy and they fall in love and everything is sunshine and roses from that point forward. And she believes that's going to happen. And much like in The Lady Vanishes, she's willing because she trusts him. And at the end of the day, it's all going to be their money anyway. So if I give him money, that's fine, because we're going to be together. We're going to get married. His business will be my business and his success is my success. I mean, you can imagine all the reasons you would do this. And as Alice said, if this is a murder, what a premeditated murder it must have been. I mean, thinking about this for a very long time about how this was going to go down, and secure in the belief that no one knew about the relationship. And go back all the way back to, what did he do when Marcia calls? He doesn't hang up on her. He quizzes her. He digs deep. He tries to find out everything that she knew. He wanted that information. He needed that information. Because if Patti had not told anyone about this, perfect crime. He has committed the perfect crime if no one knows, because no one would even suspect. No one would know about her climbing into the back of a truck and then disappearing afterwards. She would just vanish into thin air. And so that becomes really important.
And you know what? It kind of was a perfect crime. She's gone, and there's been no sign of her, and there's been no prosecution. And there's no kind of beyond a reasonable doubt tying him to her. And so in a lot of ways, he did, if he did this, commit the perfect crime.
It is. And it's also, just to continue to go back to Australian podcast, those of you who followed the teacher's pet case, the Chris Dawson case in Australia, his wife disappeared, vanished, and he ended up having an affair with, or he was having an affair with like a 16-year-old babysitter at the time. Not a good guy. His wife disappears, and it takes forever for them to prosecute him, but they eventually do. They eventually prosecute him, and they get sort of a nobody conviction. And it was just because the circumstances of the whole thing were so insane that no one could believe that she would disappear on her own. And he was the only person who really had the opportunity to do anything about it. You have a similar situation here. This is a really close case to being able to prosecute. Kind of agree with Alice. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this whole beyond a reasonable doubt thing.
I'm torn in the sense of, do you just go for a Hail Mary when it's so many years out and like you're not going to get any more evidence and just see what a jury says and recognizing
there's no question in my mind they're waiting on the blood. Well, now the blood's been tested and it's not hers. So yeah. Now look.
Like, it's kind of like, well, I mean, following the timeline, of course it's circumstantial, but kind of leave it up to a jury, because if he's acquitted, he's acquitted, but you're not going to get another shot at him anyways. So leave it up to the hands of 12 jurors.
You know, and there's an interesting question about whether or not the friend was involved if he did something like this. And I'm always skeptical of cases where there has to be someone else involved. Not because it doesn't happen, but there are lots of cases where a friend helps someone commit a murder. Happens all the time. But nevertheless, if that were true, you still would have gone 20-something years with this person who might have known something never saying anything. It's also possible that he really did drop his friend off, and then whatever happened after that. Now, it wasn't an angry thing because, as we said, there was no plan to go to Canada. This had to have been, if it's a murder, it was a planned murder. It was always intended to be a murder. And so the friend could just be alibi building.
And the friend may be lying, but not for the kind of illicit purpose of covering up a murder. It could be that they were doing something like smoking pot. And so that's why it was 45 minutes, because they got some burgers and smoked some pot. And he's not going to tell the cops that he was smoking pot because it's illegal. He doesn't want to get in trouble. So he lies a little bit and says, oh, it took so long because we were waiting in line. You know, we talk about this all the time. When people lie, it could be for a lot of reasons. And it's usually because they're self-centered and all they care about is themselves. And if he really believes that Bob, his friend who he knows well, is not in an affair, and why would he have there's no way there was another person in the back of the truck, like that's crazy, then why would he say anything different? He doesn't know that his 45-minute story may be covering up something like a murder. You know, it could be as simple as they were doing something they shouldn't have.
Well, I know what I think happened in this case. If Bob wants to reach out and correct any inconsistencies or things he thinks are false, that's
we
great.
didn't use his name,
Bob
though.
wants to sue us for defamation. I look forward to that deposition. Let it come. But this is a case that should be solved. Kind of feel like it already has been. Should be solved, and we really do just need one or two more pieces of evidence. So once again, if you're and hey, I'm telling you guys, y'all think I'm crazy. Y'all think we're just making this up. But it kind of blows my mind, the people who reach out to us recently and their connections to these cases. We had one today that I'm not gonna tell you what it was, but it was like, wow, that's crazy that you're that close to this. And so it is not impossible that somebody out there has some piece of information about this case. It's an old case. It's not a famous case. So who knows? Maybe somebody knows something. She's out there somewhere. Whether she disappeared on her own accord and she's living her life in Columbus or whatever, I don't know. She's out there somewhere. And finding her in whatever condition you found her could go a long way to bringing closure to this case. So we hope somebody out there has something that they can share. Alice has given you the phone numbers you can call. We'll put those on the website as well. Or email us, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @prosecutorspod. Wherever you get the podcast, you can reach out to us. You can send us a message on YouTube or send us a message on Patreon. Whatever it is you do, go ahead and do that, because there are so many cases we cover where it irritates me because it just feels like we're right there and this should have been solved and it wasn't solved. And that's they're all injustices when they're not solved. But when it feels like, man, what is going on here? Why can't we solve this case? It's particularly bad. And this one irritates me for that reason. So I'm hoping somebody out there has something. Well, Alice, before we sign off, is there anything you want to add?
No, but you got me fired up after a day of throwing up.
There you go.
So.
Glad to get you back in the game.
Thanks. No, but I do hope that there's justice for Patti and for her daughter to finally know what happened to her mom that she lost at such a young age.
Yes, and her daughter, everybody says that Patti lived for her daughter. Her daughter is now a young woman and has grown up not knowing what happened to her mom. So giving her some closure would be fantastic. Well, guys, we'll be back next week. We're going to have a wrongful conviction case for you next week. Is it a wrongful conviction or not? Well, we'll try and figure that out. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
You know, my worst fear is that when I disappear, it'll say the real stats, like how tall I am, how old I am, and how much I weigh. You know?
It's the weight, yeah.
It's like, gosh, do you have to put the weight there? A picture can do it enough justice, you know?
I used to be 6 feet tall, but I think I've shrunk. So now I'm 5'11".
Right. Yeah, I'm
I
definitely.
would like to just be 6 feet, you know?
I'm not 5'4", but I say I'm 5'4". I'm 5'3"
maybe
and
put my
3/4.
weight. It's really not that important to find me. It's more important that I'm remembered the way I want to be remembered, right?
Exactly. Do you think she's actually 29, or was I'm 29 for the 4th time?
Exactly.
And I'm just saying, I'm not judging. I want my age to be 29 too.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.